started.
All right.
Well, if you'd just like to start with a little introduction of who you are,
Sure.
your connection.
So my name is Martha Henk, and I'm the executive director of the Food Bank of East Alabama. Sometimes I'll have student groups come out, and someone will say, "Well, when did you start? How long have you worked here?" And I said, "Well, I started working in 1995," and I see everybody looking at each other, and it's like, "What?" And it's like, "Well, we weren't born yet."
Yeah.
Okay, talk about feeling old. It actually opened in 1993. We're part of a national network called Feeding America, based in Chicago. So there are more than 200 food banks across the United States, 8 of them in Alabama. So our food bank is actually one of the smaller of the food banks. We're affiliated with the Montgomery area food bank. So there's 4, I think of them as big boy food banks. So it's like Huntsville, Birmingham, Montgomery, and Mobile, or Theodore. And then there's 4 of us that are smaller that are affiliated with one of the big ones. So Selma, Tuscaloosa is actually one of the small ones too, I'll mention. And then Auburn, and then Dothan as well. It's interesting. There's when I started working at the food bank back in 1995, at that point, 1 out of every 11 Alabama residents was considered food insecure. That's now 1 out of every 5. And you don't have to be a math major to understand. We're talking about it's a serious problem. So in my service area, in fact, I'm going to make sure I have the correct numbers. In my service area, we actually cover a 7-county service area. So we're not the Auburn Food Bank, we're not the Lee County Food Bank, we're the Food Bank of East Alabama. So our counties are Barber, Chambers, Lee, Tallapoosa, Randolph, Russell, and Macon County. And out of those, the average food insecurity rate is 16.4%. Here in Lee County, it's 14.9%. So here in Lee County, that equates to 23,990 individuals. Out of that, 5,760 are children. In my whole service area, 57,220 people are considered food insecure. So it's not a small issue at all. Why is there hunger in the United States? It's not an issue. There's no shortage of food. There's plenty of food to feed the whole country. It really is a distribution issue. It's not a resource issue at all. So the challenge for the food bank network is to figure out, where is food being wasted? How can we rescue that? What can we put in place to rescue it? And then how do we make the step to get it actually into the hands of the people that need it? So a simple concept, but it's actually pretty complicated. In order to partner with the food bank, there's a process for applying as a partner agency. An agency has to either have their 501c3 status, their nonprofit status, granted by the IRS, and that needs to be current. That's something we do track. Or they need to be an equivalent. So a church would be an equivalent. And then have some kind of outreach to the community in need. Strong donor base, and that both food and financial donors. And we have a strong track record now of doing the right thing with our funding. For example, based on our last 990, more than 98% of our financial resources go toward direct program services, and a small amount goes toward overhead or management, and that really matters to me. The Walmart Distribution Center is a wonderful resource to us. So they opened in 2000, and if you're not familiar, the Walmart Distribution Center is not where individuals go to shop. They supply the super Walmarts, right? So they're kind of like the food bank in that sense, in that they're like the middle person in this process. But because they're located here, they have a lot of salvage food or food that they can't use, or food that's close to a use by date. And so we are enormous beneficiaries of that. We have, over the last 20 years, actually gotten more than 20 million pounds from them. And in visiting other food banks that don't have a Walmart distribution center in their backyard, I can see what a big difference that makes. We were barely surviving. I mean, it was super challenging. So it's interesting that you ask about a plan, because we are right now in the middle of developing what we're calling a strategic plan instead of a long-range plan, right? And I mean, we moved into this building in January of 2020, and we thought, man, that was the hardest thing that we were going to face that year. And then the pandemic hit,
Right.
and everything was just completely upended. And we at one point, only a third of our partner agencies were operating because they were all, I mean, think about a lot of them were in churches, right? So churches were closed down. A lot of the volunteers are elderly at those places, and so a lot of places just shut down, forced the food bank to step way outside of its comfort zone, started taking on much more direct service responsibilities. We started doing some direct service out of the building here. We learned to notify the Auburn Police Department when we were going to do that, because we had cars lined up all the way to Highway 14 and down, and it got to be really kind of scary. You know, in the same way that we went to the grocery store and it's like, oh my gosh, where is this? Where is whatever, the toilet paper, the whatever. But there was a really funny little thing on Facebook, which is, there were the things that even when you're like desperate, you will not buy, right? These few little whatever, spinach chips or something like that. You know, but in the same way, our agencies were also panicking about getting food, and the people that they were trying to serve were also panicking about food. So I actually did a picture. This shows you what our warehouse looked like at the beginning of the pandemic, and this shows you a month in.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So you can see where we're starting to get like super nervous about where are we going to find food. Grocery stores didn't want us to come pick up, so there's that. You know, the supply. I swear, the supply chain has just gotten so much more complicated than we ever realized, and it's still happening right now. We had a whole shipment that we were expecting of canned goods, and it's like, whoops, no, we're not going to get it. They had the food. They just didn't have the aluminum for the cans. Our community market, which I will say I'm just intensely proud of. We created that back in 2003. It's a client choice grocery store where you walk in and you go through a short eligibility process, you know, and then you get a grocery card and you actually get to go to select your food. You know, if we went into the grocery store and the manager came over and said, "Oh, you don't need a cart here, I've got your groceries for you," you'd say, "Wait a minute, how do you know what I like to eat?" I mean, I you know, maybe my kids like this cereal, but they don't like that cereal. But the whole thing about having the dignity of being able to choose your own food, to select what works for you. Are you a vegetarian? In which case, I don't really need to give you meat. And so that's something. I mean, it was really a model program. Terribly sad to say, they're not a client choice food pantry at the moment. Right now, they're doing pre-packed boxes of they have perishable food and non-perishable. Cars drive through and they're putting it in the back of their car. We will get back to the other, but it's not there now. Here at the food bank too, we had a big area, marketplace area, where our agencies could come in and select, you know, food off of our shelves, and we've shut that down just because we're trying to minimize the face-to-face contact as much as possible. So we're going to get back to that. Yeah, and that's a good question, and that's something that that Feeding America takes really seriously. So it used to be that you were judged just on how many pounds does your food bank get out in this whole in all of your counties, and then it's now down to more of how do you what are your programs and what is your distribution in each county, and then so it's comparing the pounds to the persons in poverty, and they come up with a goal that each food bank is supposed to have. But then for us, we really look at where are the gaps in our service area. You know, we have a big challenge. I mean, if we were the Chicago Food Depository and it was just a few, you know, miles that that my food bank was responsible for, that'd be one thing. But you get into these rural areas and it gets like super challenging. My goal is to have a food distribution point within 10 miles of every needy person in our service area. So it's a big challenge, but it's one that we're working towards. So that one of the things we look at is, you know, we participate in the summer feeding program. So where are the gaps in that when kids are not in school, so they don't have access to the school lunch? Then how are they going to get food? We have senior brown bag programs in 4 of our counties, and so, you know, that's those two ends of the age spectrum, the seniors and the children. That's big. I mean, not that there isn't food insecurity all throughout, but those are particularly challenging. Well, you know, one of the things that I was going to say is, you know, when you guys came into this room and I pointed out the pictures on the wall, you know, the black and white photos. A friend of mine went to some of the sites that get food from the food bank and took pictures. And one of the things I love about it is it shows. So it's not an old person or a young person issue, and it's not a white or a black issue. And some of these are on-site feeding locations, and some of these are food pantries. But one of the things that I've learned is that, you know, statistics are for the head, but stories are for the heart. And to me, it always goes back to the story. It goes back to who I've met along the way. I think about this little girl who we were talking to her about being hungry, and she started a little girl with this nimbus of hair, and she said, my daddy just said, drink lots of water in the water fountain because then your stomach doesn't hurt. Or the woman that was eating the cat food and rice, or the woman who I delivered her box of food to her house, and she just started to clap, and she said, now I'll be able to feed my dog. And bless her heart, she had a dog that was just this, it's amazing what you can learn to love, right? But anyway, it was this scrawny little thing, but she didn't, in addition to her eating, she was going to be feeding her dog as well. So, those are just the things that really stick in my mind, We have a wide variety of donors, and so it would be everything from, old fogies like me who write a check and mail it, right? We do have the capability of accepting donations online, which is like really important. We don't yet do Venmo, but maybe we'll at some point.
Maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe one day. So, we're really super grateful for any level of support. I'll sometimes have people say to me, I can't really give that much, and I'm not really sure that what I'm going to do is going to make that much of a difference. But think about this. For every $1 that we get in a donation, we can distribute the equivalent of 7 meals. $1 at the grocery store, could I get a can of green beans? Yeah, probably a can of green beans. I couldn't do 7 meals. And so by using donated product and also pulling on the resources of the network, financial gifts go a long ways. But, people will sometimes say, would you rather have food or would you rather have money? And that's a really super hard question to answer. Yeah. And really both are critically important. The thing about financial support is that it enables us to then get some of the items that we very specifically need to kind of round out our inventory, which is what we've been doing, a lot in the last 18 months or so. And so the financial resources go a long ways. And as I said before, I'm personally a donor, financial donor, and it's because I know that I know how it's going to be used. I know that this isn't just about scattering some food out there and hoping that maybe it hits its target. All of our agencies that get food are required to keep records on how they've used the food. If they serve meals, they keep a menu on how many people were served, what portion of that came from the food bank. If it's a food pantry, the food is actually weighed, and there's a determination of category, which of these eligibility tools best fits, and it could be an income thing, or it can be getting Social Security disability or TANF or whatever, And so I feel good about the fact that it's actually really going to where it needs to go to. We rely heavily on volunteers, and boy, did we discover that the importance of that even more during the pandemic when Auburn University shut down. A big portion of our volunteers went away. So last year we recorded more than 18,000 volunteer hours. So when
that was during the pandemic.
That was some of that was during the pandemic. Yeah. So those numbers were down from the previous
What
years.
What are they normally?
So it would be more like 26,000, maybe even a little bit higher.
Okay.
Yeah. So that, when you think about the value of a volunteer hour, and that, that enables us to have a relatively small staff. It looks like we have a lot of people, but we couldn't do what we do without the volunteer support. So we learned that it's really important to establish shifts, because we would have times in the past where we would have, 45 fraternity guys show up saying, hey, I'm here to help. It's like, no, that doesn't work too well for us, because we have to have a limited, there's only so much space that we have. And so we have an early shift, a 7 to 9, a 9 to 12, and then a 1 to 3 shift, and that's Monday through Friday. And so a volunteer comes into the front office, they sign in the book, and then they're directed to go back into the volunteer area. Most of our volunteer work is sorting through salvage food. So salvage food would be, it's come in food drives, it's being picked up at the grocery store. A lot of it is coming from the Walmart distribution center. So it's like cases that have broken open, the store can't sell it, right? Might be some damage, some compression damage on a case. So back in the back, I think this morning, bless their hearts, the volunteers, I think, are sorting through frozen product, which is probably one of the more challenging things. But at the same time, I saw some really fabulous meat. That gives us that nice variety. The salvage food gives us that great variety. And so one thing that I would say is that, I think we all want to feel like we're making a difference. We want to know that we're making a difference, and in a very concrete way to make a difference is to support the food bank or the food pantries in the community, to realize that one person can make a difference. And so whether that support, some people don't have the financial resources, and so to volunteer their time is pretty fantastic. I guess I would just encourage people to find, what if you see something that needs to be done, man, tie up your shoelaces and get to work. Do something to make a difference.
Yeah.
It really is within our power to make that difference.